for Punta del Cazador, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and on behalf of Retake Our Democracy, a 501c4 nonprofit operating in Mexico. And I also want to thank the recorder for hanging in there. We've all worked sick before. It's no fun. I've spoken many times before the PRC, and I've listened even more. What I've heard most often is compelling testimony that was presented to hearing officers like yourself with PNM forecasting models that are identified by other people testifying as being flawed, as misrepresenting the facts, intentionally flawed, I'd say, and skewed in order to maximize PNM profit. In the IRP hearing, you will get to hear again from PNM as they have arbitrarily limited the proportion of renewables that are possible in their forecasting model, so as to make to skew those results in favor of more costly natural gas and nuclear. They projected the current cost of solar and wind well above the actual current market costs. They also projected that the cost of solar and wind would increase going forward, when everything that you see in the news today are trends in the declining cost of solar. I would ask that the Commission and the hearing officer pay particular attention to Mr. Solomon's testimony, where he delineated with great detail how that plays out. The resulted projected energy mix going forward relies, as proposed by PNM, relies heavily on building 2 new gas plants and the purchase of the leases for Palo Verde nuclear facility in Nevada. By purchasing that lease, it puts New Mexico ratepayers at risk of having to pay the freight on the reclamation costs that are going to be enormous. There is no good reason for the PRC to approve putting the ratepayers at this risk. The reason why PNM would prefer to see natural gas and nuclear is very simple. There is much greater profit in those investments than there is in solar or wind. Solar or wind tend not to be centrally generated and tend not to require inordinate maintenance and repair costs, whereas gas and nuclear have big costs involved in operating their facilities and in the remediation phases. And PNM makes a 10.9% profit on every one of those costs, and they don't stand to make much on solar and wind. I mentioned I've heard many hours of testimony here before. After those testimonies, every single time since 2015, I have heard the hearing officers find flaws in PNM's projections and then reject their proposals. And every time, by a vote of 3-2, PNM has gotten its way. How is this possible? How is it that hearing officers who hear all of the testimony, review all of the documentation, that's their job, how is it that their testimony and their recommendations are summarily rejected? I have a theory. The PRC commissioners are supposed to protect the interests of ratepayers, and they never do. Once again, you will hear the testimony, and I suspect that the hearing officers will once again find fault with PNM's projections. But I suspect that the commissioners, Lovejoy, Jones, and Lyons, will once again vote with their industry partners. And I call them partners for a reason. Why do they do this? I'm sure you've read recently how PNM, the company submitting this IRP, has just donated nearly $500,000 to a PAC that is funneling that money into campaign ads for Commissioner Jones and Lovejoy. How is that? I'm sorry? Okay, I've just got one sentence like the one before. It's a much shorter sentence.
Very well, sir.
If this isn't the most transparent instance of collusion and corruption, I don't know what it is. I think that Commissioners Lovejoy and Jones should recuse themselves from these this IRP, as they obviously have a vested interest in PNM. The hearing, I would like to make one last request of the hearing officer. Please make your recommendations as unequivocal and strongly worded as possible. We want it on the record that it was very clear to you what the right thing to do was, so that when the vote comes, we'll have something to measure that vote against. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment, Mr. Chair.